The story begins in the Hunter Guild Tavern. Jin Haoyan, a veteran hunter nicknamed Slayer, walked up to the bar and placed the magic crystals on the table. Xiuxue asked him by his nickname. "Will he order as usual?" Haoyan walked over to the table and said as he sat down that he would. The people in the tavern were cheering, discussing the main character who had just emerged from a god-tier dungeon. He was doing as usual. Meanwhile, at the next table, the hunters were discussing what was going on in the tavern. They knew that each purple magic crystal was worth over 1 billion coins, which was simply amazing. However, what did, as usual, mean? Apparently, it was a newbie who asked, so he didn't know. Slayer always donates all of his magic crystals to upgrade the guild's equipment and fund the training of newbies. Without this gentleman, the guild would not have become what it is now. For them, the hunters, he is like a god. The protagonist slapped Xiaoxue's butt with his hand, who dropped the bottle from her hands in surprise. Haoyan said, grinning, that her figure clearly did not go with her grandmother. Xiaoxue pushed him away with force and indignantly asked, "Is he not dear to life at all?" Haoyan said, pointing his index finger at her, that Xiaoxue's grandmother had a much worse character. The hunters choked on their drinks in surprise. The young hunter asked if they were sure that he really was a god to them. The man hesitantly agreed with this, chuckling. The hunters looked at the protagonist in confusion. The young hunter said that their conversations about gods reminded them of one thing. Do they remember the time when the Demon King and his 7 generals were banished back to their world? Then a mysterious silhouette did it. The woman asked, "Is he still drawing comics?" "What exactly does he draw?" The young hunter said with a smile, "It's a comic about a mysterious silhouette. And compared to the hunter, this story is much more interesting. He still can't find any information about him. Everyone just says that this mysterious silhouette sacrificed his life to defeat the Demon King. According to rumors, he was the very first hunter on Earth and looked very young. In the end, the Demon King was sealed in another dimension, and soon after, vast gates began to open all over the world. Because of which, humanity received many supernatural abilities." The protagonist finished his drink and, putting the mug on the table, put coins next to it. Haoyan said, standing up from his chair and crossing his arms over his chest, that it was time for him to go. Xiuxue said in surprise that he had just arrived there. The protagonist put his hand on her head and said with a smile that he only wanted to see her. He apologizes to her. Xiuxue said indignantly, crossing her arms under her chest, that it was too late for an apology. If he touched her butt again, she would cut off his hand. Haoyan said, smiling and addressing her affectionately, that he would not do it again, because he promised her this. Perhaps one day their paths would cross again. Xiuxue looked at him in surprise and asked what was the message in his words. The protagonist silently turned around and walked out of the tavern. He thought that for him, the nickname, Slayer, is a symbol of endless suffering, like a shining sign in the night sky that dispels darkness and drives out evil. However, this light is born from the blood and life of others. It is fear, death, destruction, and the end of everything. Haoyan walked along the ruined street. He stopped, lit a cigarette, looking at the bloody moon. The protagonist said that for him, the end is near. Around him was a ruined city that was burning in flames. Haoyan thought that 60 years ago, in the year 2023 of the stellar calendar, the Demon King appeared accompanied by 7 generals, tearing apart the fabric of space and time to begin an invasion of the human world. At that time, people were panicking, trying to escape and calling for help while the world was being destroyed around them. The monsters mercilessly killed everyone who got in their way. At that time, the protagonist was holding Yingying's hand, who was dying. Haoyan said with tears in his eyes that they needed help to be saved. He called her by name, without holding back his emotions. Xiaoying said, putting her hand on his chest and calling him by name, that this could not be. He should at least run away from there quickly. She screamed with the last of her strength that he needed to survive and be saved. The protagonist cried out loudly, mourning his friend. After a while, Haoyan stood at the spatial gate of the god-level dungeon. He put out his cigarette on the ground. The protagonist said that this was his last god-level dungeon. The return stone should be here. After a while, inside the god-level dungeon, the monster said, blazing with fire, that it never thought that a human could go this far. Therefore, it wants to admit defeat. The protagonist used his ability, destroyed half of the monster's body with one blow. The fire demon asked, "How is this even possible?" Haoyan finished off this monster with his ability. The protagonist said that he was sorry, but he was in a hurry. He did not have time to listen to this whining. He destroyed the monster's body, and pulled out a sphere from its body. Haoyan asked, "This is the return stone, right?" The protagonist was lost in his thoughts, and thought that they were all already dead. Then what is the point of fighting? Everything he had was taken away from him. Family, friends, comrades, they were all already dead. So what was he fighting for then? Why was he doing all this? A mysterious voice rang out, saying that it was not too late to fix everything. He had to find the returning stone, which was in one of the god-level dungeons. And then this item would take him back to the past, so he had to move forward. Haoyan wondered, whose voice was this now? Who was talking to him? After all, he had dedicated his life to searching for and fighting for this item. Out of fear of losing everything, he had been moving inexorably towards his goal for these 50 years. The protagonist thought, opening his eyes and grabbing the return stone, that if the mysterious voice really told the truth, then he was begging him to return him 60 years ago. Some time later, in the protagonist's room, Haoyan opened his eyes in surprise and looked around. He thought that he had really returned. This wasn't a dream, was it? The protagonist immediately grabbed the phone and called Ying. He thought about letting her answer the phone. Xiaoying answered the phone and asked him by name, "Is there something wrong? It's only 5 in the morning, why isn't he sleeping?" Haoyan thought that she was still alive. She was really still alive. The male lead said with tears in his eyes that he was very happy to hear her voice. Xiaoying asked, should he already tell her what's wrong? Did something really happen? The male lead just kept repeating her name. Xiaoying asked, why did he keep calling her by name? Was he sick? Why did his voice sound so strange? If he was really sick, then let him drink his medicine quickly. Could it be that he was acting like this because he hadn't finished his homework yet? If he wanted, she could come to him and let him just copy her homework. Haoyan took out an item and activated its ability, allowing him to become young again. Xiaoying asked irritably, is he still there? The main character said with tears in his eyes that he was fine, he just woke up, that's why his voice was so hoarse. He called her by her name again. Xiaoying asked why he kept calling her by her name. Let him just say what he wants. Haoyan said that he missed her very much. The protagonist thought that in the whole 60 years there, not a day had passed that he didn't think about her. About everyone he had lost. Xiaoying said that he was definitely acting strange now, after all, they had only seen each other yesterday. She said, blushing, that if he didn't want to say anything else, then she would go to bed. Yesterday was a very busy day. Haoyan said with a smile that she should wait for him. Xiaoying sighed in surprise, not understanding what he was talking about. The protagonist said that he would come to her soon. Xiaoying asked why he would come to her at this hour. Her neighbor was already asleep, and she didn't want to wake her up. Haoyan said as he headed towards her that he would not disturb her neighbor, just let her wait for him. Xiaoying tried to stop him, but it was useless. The protagonist thought as he ran down the street that he remembered this road. If he went forward, he would come straight to her house. He thought as he joyfully jumped along the way that he remembered everything, the number of lanterns, the color of the houses, and even the wind. He was finally back. After a while near her house, Haoyan said using the phone and calling her by name that he was waiting downstairs. Xiaoying asked as she looked out the window, has he completely lost his mind already? The protagonist said, smiling and raising his hand up, that she needed to go down. They can look at the stars together. After a while, Xiaoying came down to him and asked, indignantly and calling him by name, why is he doing this? The protagonist hugged her, calling her by name. Xiaoying indignantly wanted to say something, but he only hugged her tighter. She said, blushing, that he should let her go, otherwise he would strangle her. Haoyan said, hugging her tightly, that he should call her and hug her a little more. Xiaoying said, returning the hug, that she agreed to this. The protagonist looked into her eyes. Xiaoying embarrassedly asked, was there something wrong with her? Haoyan asked, looking at her thoughtfully, was she really like this? He had a feeling that something was wrong with her. Xiaoying indignantly asked, covering her chest with her hands and calling him by name, where was he looking just now? The male lead grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him, which made her very surprised. Xiaoying blushed and tried to resist him. Haoyan looked at her seriously, and said by name that she did not need to enlarge her breasts. In his opinion, she was already perfect. Xiaoying asked why he was talking about breast enlargement. The male lead wanted to pounce on her with greedy eyes. Xiaoying said that he wanted to tell her that he liked her body. Haoyan grabbed her body with his hands, and she screamed embarrassedly. He said that she hardly had implants. Somehow, everything was not as he remembered. Xiaoying got angry and said by name, hitting him on the head, that he did not need his hands anymore. The male lead said, clutching his head, that he must still be sleeping. Yunyu had a completely different personality. She was gentle and sweet. This rude woman was definitely not her. Xiaoying asked, looking at him with hatred, so he was just sleeping? That's not true at all, he was just completely out of his mind. She asked, offering him her hand, what was he sitting there for? They were going to look at the stars. Sometime later, in the park. Xiaoying said that she was able to sneak out unnoticed, so they had some time to be together there. She looked at the protagonist with embarrassment. Haoyan said, leaning against her, that he really missed her. Xiaoying awkwardly said that they had just met. The protagonist said that of course it was. He whispered to himself, looking away seriously, that he would definitely save everyone in 3 days. Sometime later, in the wild forest on the outskirts of the city, Haoyan said that in 48 hours, the Demon King would begin his invasion of Earth. Maybe he didn't lose too much of his strength during the time travel. The protagonist activated his abilities by closing his eyes, and a golden lightning struck him. He turned into an old man and flew above the ground. Haoyan said, folding his hands on his chest, that this is 1% of his powers, and this is just great. So nothing has changed. He snapped his fingers, and the destruction around him began to recover. The protagonist asked, landing on the ground, so it considers itself the Demon King, right? This time, he will make this monster eat the earth and beg for mercy from him. Sometime later at school, the protagonist sat down at his desk. Hua Xian happily asked, why did he not come with his Xiaoying? Did they really quarrel? Haoyan said, closing his eyes, that this is not true at all. You can just never tell exactly what women are thinking. Xian said, grinning, that he is a real connoisseur of women's hearts. He is already so grown up. Did they check the time there well yesterday? Her neighbor said that she ran out into the street in the middle of the night. You don't have to answer, but he's acting like an old man. He didn't even say hello to him, which was really rude of him. The protagonist thought that he looked like a teenager now, and he still wasn't used to it. So he should act more cheerfully. Haoyan said with a smile that everything should be done step by step and not rushed. In the end, everything will work out. He thought, this is how teenagers act, right? Xian said, looking at him with a puzzled look, that he was acting really weird today. He looked tired, but he didn't say a word. So he was scared to even imagine what really happened to him. The protagonist thought, looking nervously, did he really overreact? Xian said with a smile, hugging the protagonist and laughing, that he should tell the truth already. He was like this now because he was empty, right? If he knew what he was talking about, of course. The protagonist thought, were they all so naive when they were young? Was this really youth? He said with an awkward laugh that it was not like that at all, they were just talking. Haoyan picked up a pencil and said that their relationship was purely platonic, and that they should stop joking about it. Class was starting soon, so they needed to focus on their studies. The protagonist thought that in the future, Xian would thank him for this advice. Xian said with a smile that the day after tomorrow, their school would organize an overnight excursion, and there would even be a hotel there. He knew what he was getting at, right? Haoyan said with a sigh that he knew what he was talking about. Xian said that if he missed such a great opportunity, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The protagonist thought in horror that this excursion in his past life had ended very badly for Xian. Haoyan was lost in his thoughts, remembering how they had been attacked by monsters on this excursion before. And he couldn't save Xian from the monster back then. Xiaoying shouted at him to stop. They had to save themselves from the monsters. The protagonist personally saw his friend being swallowed by the monster. Haoyan thought as he opened his eyes that he couldn't tell them what would happen the day after tomorrow. They would most likely not believe him, or would just panic, which would only cause more trouble. Xian asked in a brotherly manner they should focus on their studies, right? Or did he hear something wrong? Haoyan looked at his friend in surprise and he asked why he was looking at him like that. Xian said with a laugh that he was just reading the textbook upside down. The protagonist blushed with shame and said that he really needed to get down to studying. He had something important coming up next week. And after that, they could go somewhere together. Xiaoying entered the classroom where they were. Xian said with a smile that she didn't even look at him when she walked in there. Xiaoying walked up to the protagonist and indignantly said that he was a pervert. Haoyan said upset that he got too carried away yesterday and lost control of himself for a second. Xiaoying said embarrassedly, handing him the box, that his parents called and said that they would not be back until Tuesday. They were worried that he would only eat noodles every day, so they asked her to bring him normal food to school. Let him not think anything extra, she just didn't want his parents to worry about him. So it was not for him at all. The protagonist took the box and said with a smile that he understood this and was very grateful to her. Xian said with a smile, clapping his hands, that if she married him, this idiot, she would definitely be a great wife and a loving mother. Xiaoying embarrassedly asked why she had to marry him. She said as she walked to her seat that class was about to start, so he needed to behave normally. Xian said with a smile that it seemed like he had really upset her. He couldn't help him with that. And he should stop looking at his breakfast, he would get tired of it when they got married. Haoyan said that if he was jealous, just say so, and he, as a good friend, would help him find a worthy partner. Xian said that he didn't need such happiness at all. He liked being single and not burdening himself with anything. The school bell rang, and the teacher said that they hadn't included this topic in the exam for 3 years, so this time it would definitely be on the exams, and they needed to be prepared for it. Haoyan thought as he looked out the window that he still felt like this was all just a dream. Had he really spent 60 years alone? Suddenly, a deafening explosion was heard in the distance outside the window. The protagonist looked out the window in surprise while the students in the classroom began to discuss what happened in the city. They asked in horror, did they hear that? Where did that sound come from? The teacher said in a panic that something must have exploded. They said it was in the eastern part of the city. How could that happen? The protagonist stood up from his chair and said that it had already started, but it was not the time for that. Haoyan said seriously, looking at his friends, that he was winding himself up too much. But he still had to personally check it out. Xiaoying noticed the protagonist running out of the classroom. Haoyan, climbing onto the roof of the school, turned back into an old man and said that no one would be able to recognize him this way. The protagonist quickly moved, jumping on the buildings of the city, and landed near the epicenter of the noise. He asked, looking at the vast gate from which the monsters were coming out, why did this happen so early? Haoyan screamed, looking at the monsters destroying the city, how is this possible? The monsters were killing people and destroying everything around them. They mocked the weak people and laughed at their helplessness. The red monster was breathing fire from its mouth and burning people alive while the people were asking for help. The protagonist thought that they were already here. He did not expect the invasion to start earlier. However, he is no longer the helpless Haoyan he was 60 years ago. He said, angry, that now he was created only to destroy the Demon King and his minions. The Demon King appeared from the gate and said that who would have thought that in this world there was someone who knew his true name. He asked, who is he? Haoyan screamed angrily, looking at this with anger, that he is the destruction of this demon. The Demon King said as he activated his powers, this sounded too trivial. He used a beam of dark energy, but to the demon's surprise, the protagonist was still alive. Haoyan asked as he hit it with all his might, why did he even come here? Let him go back to where he came from. The Demon King was back in his dimension, and the protagonist stood in his way. The Demon King thought, is he bleeding? Haoyan said as he activated his powers, then he will forever remain in the darkness. Huge hands of energy began to close the spatial gate. The protagonist used the release of his powers, shouting furiously. The Demon King thought, is it really possible to close the spatial gate with bare hands? Is this some kind of trick? The protagonist thought as he applied more strength, it was time for it to close already. The Demon King laughed to himself and smiled as he looked at the protagonist. Haoyan closed the spatial gate with his own powers. He said that he really did it. The protagonist looked at the remaining monsters in the city, who continued to destroy and kill all the people around them. Haoyan killed one monster with a blow to the head. At this time, he was secretly filmed. The protagonist said that it was finally over. After a while, the protagonist's father said on the phone that he and his mother would be going home tomorrow. So he needed to take care of himself and remember to close the door and windows at night. Haoyan said with a smile that he understood everything and would not forget his father's instructions. He thought, lying on the sofa and closing his eyes, that although the Demon King's invasion began earlier than he expected, he managed to deal with all of it without any serious problems. His parents, Xiaoying, and everything around him were safe. Now he could finally enjoy the fact that he was only 15 years old. The protagonist said with a smile that because of yesterday's events, their school gave them all a 3-day break, which was just in time, because he needed to collect his thoughts. he said as he took it out and held it in his hands. It was a return stone that did not take anything away from him and did not even limit his powers. However, when he transformed into his younger self, his powers disappeared. Hao-Yan happily asked, so he was the only person in the world who had superpowers? The protagonist blushed and said that so many bad thoughts came to his mind at once. He said, looking at his inventory through the system window, that he never thought that there would be so many things in the last divine dungeon. However, now it was all useless. It was a pity that he had so many Mora coins left. Hao-Yan thought that he would keep this as a souvenir. Suddenly, the doorbell rang and he said as he approached the door that he would open it right now. Xian shouted, smiling and walking inside, that he must quickly turn on his computer. Hao-Yan asked, what's the matter? Xian asked, does he not read the news at all? He excitedly said that the entire internet was literally exploding from this news right now. This is really something just incredible. Xian said, pointing his index finger at the monitor screen, that this old man is so cool. And this scene in the video, it was like a dream came true. Hao-Yan asked, what is he even talking about? The main character stared in shock at the video, where he had just finished killing the last monster while in the form of an old man. Hao-Yan covered his face with his hand and thought that this incident was filmed on camera. Xian said that aliens decided to start an invasion of Earth, but this old man drove them away single-handedly. He happily said that now the whole internet is looking for him. If he hadn't seen everything with his own eyes, he would have thought that this was just a scene from a movie. It turns out that superpowers really exist. Hao-Yan said, awkwardly looking away and laughing, that means there were aliens. For some reason, he didn't see them there, and thought that a gas pipeline just exploded nearby. Xian screamed, grabbing it with his hands, does he even understand how important this is? He said, pointing his index finger upwards, that there must be more people in the world with superpowers. So even the two of them could have them. Xian said, looking at him with disappointment. After all, he had always been very interested in superpowers and unusual phenomena. So why was he so calm now? Hao-Yan said that he had misunderstood him. He was still in shock and trying to put it all together in his head. Xian asked what kind of superpowers he would like to have for himself. Hao-Yan said that he had never thought about it, because it was impossible. Xian asked with a smile, why did he decide that? After all, he had seen that old man too, and he was living proof of the opposite. So he was now sure that those aliens could still come back. The protagonist said irritably that he needed to wipe his drool. And let him stop fantasizing already. Xian said embarrassedly that he had decided what he wanted. He wanted to learn how to stop time. Hao-Yan said sullenly that he had known it all along. Xian put his hand on the protagonist's shoulder and said that if he had that kind of power, he would definitely help him realize his dream with Xiaoying. He would do it for his friend. He would risk anything and never back down. The protagonist said that there was no need for that. He preferred to take things step by step, so let everything happen naturally. Xian shouted, pointing his thumb at himself, that he would then see everything for himself on this excursion next Friday. Hao-Yan thought in horror of what could happen on the excursion. However, it would not happen anymore, it was all over now. The protagonist gave Xian a friendly slap on the chest and said that he should not even think about doing that. He did not want Xiaoying to beat him to death. Xian just laughed at it. After some time in the mountains, the teacher said that everyone needed to register and check into their rooms. The rest of the day was free time. Tomorrow, at 8:30 in the morning, they will meet in the lobby for group lessons. Do they understand everything? The students shouted in agreement as they got off the bus. Xian said that he and Xiaoying had not had a normal conversation today. Apparently, she was really upset with his behavior. He hadn't done anything bad to her yet. Right. Otherwise, why would she be angry with him for so long? Hao-Yan said, looking at him with irritation, that his whole head is filled with all sorts of perversions. Let him leave some room for something smart. Xian said, happily lying on the bed, that everything there is already taken. He said, sitting up on the bed, that he knows him well. He has something hidden there. He shouldn't be embarrassed about it. Compared to him, he is still a beginner in this matter. Hao-Yan thought, looking at him in shock, what exactly is he hiding there? Was he really that dishonest when he was younger? He thought that he would definitely make Xuxue angry, and she would ask him what he was thinking. Xian said that they should enjoy their lives while they were still young. Once they started working, all the joy and carelessness would disappear. Because they would go home every day too tired to do anything else. The protagonist asked with a smile, what was he so worried about? Living to adulthood was already a great success. Haoyan was thinking about his own things while pouring water into the kettle, which he put on to boil. After a while, the protagonist sat with tea in his hands and said that they should invite Xiaoying to go camping with him. Xian said that he had something to tell him. Haoyan asked what was the matter. Xian said that he had been acting like an old man lately. To be honest, he gives off the same aura as that old man who fought off the aliens. Haoyan stared at him in surprise. Xian said that it wasn't just the way he spoke, but his whole demeanor. Something must have happened between him and Xiaoying that night. Was there trouble in paradise? He said with a knowing sigh that he knew what it was. It must have been his little comrade who failed the task, right? That would explain why he looked so down. Haoyan said with a smile that he was just getting used to getting up early so he could fully concentrate on his studies. After all, he had been taking care of his health since he was a child, so this kind of schedule was normal for him. It was definitely not the case with the average comrade. He always stood proudly and straight at his post. Xian said, taking things out of his suitcase, that he should wait for a while. He said with a smile, holding a jar in his hand, that he finally found it. Xian said, smiling arrogantly and handing it to him, that he should add some of this ginseng to his diet. Goji berries alone would not be enough for him. Haoyan asked in surprise why did he bring this with him. Suddenly, Xiaoying knocked on the door and asked if they were ready to go there. Xian said, opening the door for her, that she was also already burning with impatience. Xiaoying asked irritably, why were they hiding in the room? Did they really want to go hiking without her? Xian said with a smile, waving his hand, that they think alike. They act just like an old married couple. Xiaoying angrily asked, what did he just say? Does he want to die that much? Xian awkwardly said, it's just a matter of time. Xiaoying angrily said, he'd better shut up. Haoyan asked with a smile, are they going to go? Xiaoying asked, looking at him awkwardly, what about him? The male lead asked in surprise, what is she talking about? Xiaoying asked, why is he looking at her like that? Haoyan became embarrassed, and then abruptly sat down. The male lead said, looking at her, that he needed to make sure of something. He said, taking a closer look at her, that he was very wrong, because the girls of today are clearly not up to par with those of his time. Xian gave him a thumbs up in approval. Xiaoying awkwardly asked, what did he just say? She screamed, slapping him with all her might, that he was just a pervert who should go to hell. Haoyan thought with annoyance that he instinctively noticed that her skirt was too short. Xiaoying turned away from him indignantly. Xian said with a smile, turning to the protagonist, that pretending to be an innocent monk would not achieve anything. It was better for him to accept himself and enjoy life with his friends. Haoyan thought, rubbing his swollen face, that he really was like that once. After a while, they went for a walk. Haoyan asked if girls that age really stay angry for so long. Xian asked if they were all like that. The protagonist thought that he was too old to even imagine what the youth of today were thinking. She was so chaste with her blue and white striped outfit, it was too boring. He thought with a blush that back when he fought with the girls, they dressed very well. Xian asked, what was he dreaming about? He better think about how he was going to apologize to Xiaoying. Because even now he was afraid to speak loudly. Haoyan sighed heavily and closed his eyes. The protagonist shouted at her, saying that she needed to wait for him. Xiaoying looked at him with displeasure. She shouted as she ran away, saying that he needed to stop chasing her. Haoyan said, trying to catch up with her, that she needed to give him a chance to explain himself. Xiaoying shouted with displeasure as she ran away, saying that she didn't want to hear anything from him. Suddenly, she tripped on a rock and started to fall. Haoyan shouted, jumping sharply and appearing next to her, saying that she needed to be careful. The protagonist picked her up in his arms, and she looked at him with surprise. Xian thought, did his friend have superpowers? Haoyan awkwardly asked, looked away, was she hurt? Xiaoying pointed to the side and asked, did he really jump that far? The protagonist said that it seemed like the truth. Xiaoying said, standing up, that she was grateful to him for helping her. Xian said that if he didn't go to the Olympic long jump team, he would let down their entire country. It was really an impressive jump. How did he even do it? Haoyan nervously looked away and said that he himself didn't know. It must be the adrenaline in his body, because a person's potential is limitless. Xiaoying shouted, waving her hand at them, that they should come to her. Xian asked, what happened? Xiaoying asked, why is it so bright here? The protagonist looked at the spatial gate in horror. He thought, this can't be happening. Where did the portal to the dungeon come from? He thought that he had sealed the demons in their world. Hao Yan remembered the story in the tavern about the mysterious figure. The protagonist looked at the portal in fear and thought, could he really be the mysterious figure in the story? Was that why it hadn't ended yet? He said irritably, clutching his head, that this simply couldn't be true. The legend said that he was a young man. Xiaoying asked worriedly, turning to him, why was he acting so strange? Was he okay? Hao Yan couldn't say a word to her and thought that the portal to the dungeon was right in front of them, which meant that history was repeating itself. Even if he didn't tell them anything, the current structure of society would still change beyond recognition. However, he couldn't be the cause of this. Xian asked in surprise as he walked closer to the portal, this is clearly an alien entrance to another dimension, right? Xiaoying asked worriedly, could this really be the entrance to another world? Hao Yan said, looking seriously, that they had better find a teacher, and he would stay here and look after this place for now. Xiaoying asked, does he want to do it alone? The protagonist thought that he should go in there and check everything himself. He said, hugging her, that he would be fine. If something happened, he would be able to escape faster than anyone. Therefore, they should go, because such things should be dealt with by adults. Hao Yan thought that they should get rid of this place as soon as possible. The protagonist said, addressing her, that they should leave from there. The faster they return, the better it will be. And he will be fine. Xiaoying lowered her gaze and asked, does he promise to take care of himself? Hao Yan asked, asking her not to worry about him. Could anything happen here at all? What if they even get rich from this? After a while, the protagonist was convinced that they left this place. He looked at the portal and activated his abilities. There was a deafening explosion and a golden lightning bolt struck him. Hao Yan turned into an old man again and lit a cigarette. The protagonist looked at the portal and went to explore another world. 5 years later, dungeon portals began to open all over the world, periodically resetting and updating. The materials mined in these portals gradually replaced traditional energy sources, which led to significant social changes. At this time, a line of people wanting to take the entrance exam lined up in front of the guild building. Ying clenched her fist, and in her other hand she held a book with an image of a fighter. She enthusiastically spoke about her dream of entering the academy and meeting the master at the opening ceremony. Then she pressed the book to her chest and said with a smile, what should I do? She already feels that she is standing very close to the hero who once saved the whole world. The protagonist, Hao Yan, thought that it was really close, but so far away. He founded the first academy and guild for those with supernatural powers, raising countless hunters. Ying wrapped her arms around the protagonist's neck and hung on him, asking if she should tell him the story of the master again. The protagonist thought she was becoming more and more obsessed, and stretched out his hand and pushed her away. He said no need. He was already getting an earache from hearing it so often. In the early days, he had to turn to the media to quickly establish the academy and guild. It had its pros and cons, and the biggest drawback was becoming an idol. Ying folded her arms under her chest and said that if he had even 1% of the master's strength, she wouldn't have to worry about him. He hasn't been making many public appearances lately. He must be very busy. Hao Yan spread his arms out and smiled awkwardly, saying that he really didn't want to go to the Hunter Academy. She should just let him go to a normal university already. His awakened ability wasn't even showing up, and he had definitely failed the entrance exam. So why waste time? She indignantly placed her hands on her hips and said, because his ability was unique. And if he explained everything to the examiners, they would appreciate him. The protagonist sighed heavily and said, but he was a sociophobe. She grabbed him by the collar of his clothes and dragged him towards the guild, saying that she would explain everything herself. As she passed by the hunters who were paying attention to them, she shouted, come on, let's go already. His ancestors are counting on him. An opportunity like this only comes once in a lifetime, and he can't miss it. Hao Yan dragged himself along the ground after her. He said that he couldn't even remember his great-great-grandfather's name. No one there had hope for him. Knowing that he was leading 2 lives, he thought that he would soon break down. Maybe he should tell her everything? Then Ying turned to him and said with a smile, if he passed the exam, then she would. He asked, so what? She shyly moved closer to his ear and whispered something, causing the protagonist's head to steam, his eyes to widen in surprise, and his face to turn red. He stood up and looked at her shyly. She turned around and asked, so will he pass? Then he confidently gave her a thumbs up, smoke billowing out of his nose, and he shouted, no problem. Some time ago, 20-year-old Xiaoying, who had the ability of a hunter, threw her head back and took a shower. It doesn't matter at all. What's important is that the world has changed a lot in the past 5 years, and so has she. After taking a shower, she sat down on the sofa next to the protagonist and, holding a carton of milk in her hand, said, "Haoyan, it's so hot in here." She asked him to turn on the air conditioner. He thought that since she had gained strength, something inside her had also awakened. He awkwardly averted his gaze from her body, which was covered only by a towel, and said, "Ying, he is a man." She moved closer to him and, looking into his eyes, said, "Of course he is a man. Did he find the remote control for the air conditioner?" He looked at her awkwardly. Then he grabbed his head and asked desperately, was he being asked why he even wanted to live with her? That's why. Some time ago, his parents were waving at their son from the back seat of the car. His father said, "Son, your parents are going on a trip around the world." As they drove forward, he shouted that Ying would take care of him from now on. Bye. In the present-time world, it was their turn to register. Ying turned to the worker and asked her to register the two of them. The girl handed them a tablet and told them to fill out these documents. After a while, Ying walked up to the worker again, holding the tablet in her hands, and said that they were done. The worker said that the entrance exam was in 2 months. They would receive a notice in the mail. Ying replied with a smile that she understood. Then the worker, smiling, holding the fighter keychains, said, "Here are some of their exclusive products. Good luck on the exam." The protagonist picked up his older toy copy and thought, whose idea was this? They will have to cut their salaries. Ying kissed the toy and said, "Her hero, she is already on her way." The protagonist looked at it in surprise, and then looked down and thought, even though it was a toy in his form, why did he feel like he was in Netherare? Some time later, in the Hunters Guild, Feinen, the head secretary and an employee of the Hunters Guild administration, who had a unique ability-enhanced cognitive skills. The Slayer entered the office and put a stack of papers on his desk and said, "Sir, this is the dungeon evaluation sent by the European guilds. Please, he must sort this out within 3 days. Also, a new portal of the A-rank dungeon opened in Zone A. Neither the government nor the other guilds have called for fighters yet. Everyone is waiting for his decision." He looked at Feinen in despair, his body shook, and said that he could no longer continue. She turned sideways to him and offered him a herbal tonic to drink. Then she put a box of drinks on a stack of papers, stood near the table and took the whip in her hands. The protagonist tilted his head back and continued to do his job. He then leaned on his fist and remembered going shopping with Ying and carrying the bags. He waved his hand and thought that he wasn't getting any younger after all. The secretary sat down on the corner of his desk, crossed her legs, and picked up some papers and said that if he doubled her salary, she would be happy to take care of these documents for him. She then adjusted her glasses and asked him what he thought. The exterminator replied that if he remembered correctly, her salary was already a whopping 100,000 Mora coins, and it only increased almost every month. He had to admit that her ability was sucking money out of him. Feinen asked, so did he agree or not? If he refused, she estimated that it would take him 17 days, 5 hours, and 37 minutes to sort out these documents. He extended his hand towards her and said he agreed. After that, Feinen adjusted the choker on her neck, took off her glasses, and a digital aura appeared around her. The time saved was exactly 1 minute. Then she put on her glasses and said, "Sir, enhanced cognitive skills are special abilities. So he must not forget to increase her salary." The exterminator looked at her and asked her to help him compile a report and advance the delayed projects. He thought that he needed to find a way to copy her ability as soon as possible. After all, this little devil was sucking money out of him every day. She put her hand on the stack of papers and said, "Of course, sir, this is her duty after all." Then she emphasized that at the end of next month, he had an important ceremony, the entrance exam to the Hunter Academy. 3 days before the event, she would prepare a speech and send it by mail. "Please do not forget to read them." She wagged her finger at him and reminded him that last year he was half an hour late and had to explain it to the reporters for a long time. The higher his status, the more strictly he needs to control his words and actions. After all, he is the idol of the new world and must watch his image. The fighter, smiling awkwardly, waved his hand at her and said, "Understood, understood." Then he added that she was too young for such comments, and he needed to take care of some personal matters first. She agreed and said that he could take care of them first. After that, she left the office, slamming the door behind her. The protagonist changed into his younger form and called Ying with the bracelet. She, busy cooking, answered the call and asked why he took so long to answer. He covered his mouth with his hand and whispered, "Quieter." He and his friends decided to go to Quest room, and you can't talk on the phone here. She took a closer look at the hologram and said, "Okay, by the way, this outfit is too big for him. Next time, he should choose something in his size. Or better yet, bring her the double-leaf lock she asked for." And he had to come back quickly, or else the dinner would get cold. He smiled awkwardly and replied, "Okay," he would go. After he hung up, he imagined himself in the guise of a slayer confessing to her that he was actually Jin Haoyan. He then sighed heavily and thought that he should still find a way to tell her the truth. Smiling, he realized that despite the significant age difference, being bossed around by a young girl did not hurt his pride too much. After all, it wasn't that bad. At least Ying survived and grew up safe and sound. Although it was a little tiring. The day of the entrance exam had arrived. The Hunter Academy was the first academy to be established after the new era began. Many hunters had gathered outside the guild building. Looking around, Ying said, "Wow, the number of applicants is much greater than last year." She then ran forward happily. Haoyan extended his hand towards her and said, "Well, the academy has been around for 4 years now, and its reputation is growing every day. Be careful, or she'll bump into someone." The next moment, she collided with Kada. After that, she walked away from him and bowed, apologizing, saying that she didn't notice him. He put his hands on his chest and awkwardly looked away, after which he said that everything was fine, and she didn't need to worry. Then, with a sharp movement, he turned around and ran in the opposite direction. Ying looked at the protagonist and asked, "Did you see? This is what a real social phobic person is." Haoyan pushed her forward with a smile and said, Okay. He doesn't have social phobia, he's a super social person. Now they need to quickly go inside, he needs to go to the toilet. In the auditorium where the entrance exam was taking place, Ying glanced at her watch and said anxiously, "It's about to start, and he hasn't shown up yet." Feigning stood on the stage, holding a microphone, and addressed the candidates. "Esteemed candidates, the introductory briefing will begin in 1 minute. Please keep quiet and take your seats as soon as possible." Ying became worried and thought, "Damn! If he's late, it might create a bad impression. What is he doing there?" At that moment, a fighter approached the secretary. She adjusted her glasses and said, "You're not even late this time, sir." She's so proud of him. But why is he sweating all over? He remembered how he had hurriedly dressed and rushed into the auditorium. Smiling awkwardly, he said, "Really?" Then he laughed and explained that it was probably too hot today. He thought, of course, he was sweating all over. First he changed in the toilet, then hid his clothes and ran here as fast as he could. He was not young anymore, after all. The secretary handed him the microphone and told him not to worry and wait a few more minutes. They had to get started. Several hunters clapped their hands happily and said that Mr. Exterminator had arrived. The protagonist took the microphone and said that he welcomed everyone. Then he turned his attention to Ying, who stood up from her seat and waved happily at him. She thought, her idol. Bless Haoyan with good luck. And he should also give her an autograph when he gets the chance. She looked ahead with eyes full of love. The exterminator was at a loss, beads of sweat were running down his face, his eyes widened in surprise, and he thought, damn, as soon as he saw Ying, all the lyrics flew out of his head. What happened? Feigning, who was standing to the side, worriedly thought, why is he silent? Did he forget the lyrics? This old man. After that, the protagonist shouted decisively, "Good luck to everyone in the exams." The end. In response, there was only dead silence. The secretary covered her face with her hand and said, "As I thought." But suddenly the hall exploded with applause. Those present exclaimed, "Brevity is the soul of wit. Mr. Fighter. How cool is he? No wonder he is considered the best." Feining's face twisted in surprise, and she said, "Okay, that worked too." Some time later, in the examination hall, Ying grabbed Haoyan's cheek and, angry, asked where he was. He bit his lip and said that the opening speech had already begun, and he was embarrassed to go inside, so he waited here. Then he awkwardly scratched the back of his head and asked her not to be angry, anything can happen. She said that they had neighboring rooms, and most likely, they would take the exams together. He must not let her down and give his all. Then the system announced, 121, 122, come to the test stand. She looked at the protagonist and smiled and said, "It's their turn. It's time to go." They took their seats and the examiner said, "Candidates, please stand on the test stand, relax your arms and look straight ahead. The scan started and Ying got 3 stars. The worker said with a smile, showing, the awakening level is 3 stars. She happily raised her fist in the air and exclaimed, hooray, 3 stars. That's an average level. The worker looked at her and wished her good luck on the next test. She folded her hands in front of her and said, yeah. The worker then looked at the protagonist's results, where an error was reported. He said, Jin Haoyan, has his ability awakened? If not, he advises against participating in the entrance exam. He might get hurt. The protagonist laughed awkwardly and asked, does that mean he thinks he should give up the exam? He smiled and thought that it would be best if he was eliminated at the very beginning. Then he would have to change his appearance all the time. Ying grabbed him by the collar and said with an awkward smile that he had the ability to copy, maybe that was it. The worker said, I see, so the ability to copy, quite a rare gift. Then he gave a thumbs up with a smile and thought that he didn't expect that there would be someone with such an ability among the participants. And his friend had 3 stars, strange. He wished him luck in the next test. Haoyan smiled awkwardly and thanked him. He thought that he was unlucky. At this time, Keita came to the examination procedure. He adjusted the headphones on his head and walked forward silently. One of the hunters pointed at him and asked, is this the same Lee Keita? His comrade said that he definitely only has 1 star. Even if he gets into the academy, he will only be in the worst class, no doubt. And then the comrade said with a smile, sister is a genius, and brother is trash. Luck is also a talent. The protagonist, watching this, thought the worst class? Somehow he doesn't remember them having such a class. He should ask Feigning to look into it. Then Ying walked up to Keita and waved her hand and said, oh, hello. There he is. He put the headphones down on his neck and said, oh, here they go again. She smiled and said that she didn't expect him to be number 123. Apparently, he would be taking the exam at the same stand as them. He looked down and said that he was afraid of failing the exam. If he failed, he would only let his sister down once again. She firmly told him not to hang his head. 1 star? So what? He said, but that's the minimum level of awakening, no prospects. Never heard of 1 star reaching the same level as 3 stars. He thinks it's better to just give up. The protagonist walked up to him, put one hand on his shoulder, and clenched the other into a fist and firmly said that the academy accepts more than just awakened ones. If he has other talents, he can enter through special recruitment. So he shouldn't hang his head. Ying pulled him by the shoulder and pointed her finger at him, saying, yes, he can look at this guy, he doesn't even have 1 star, but he doesn't care at all. Keita asked in surprise, not a single star? Didn't awaken superpowers? The protagonist replied that it wasn't quite like that. He had the ability to copy. At that moment, Ouyang Wei and his companions approached them. With his hands in his pockets, he said with an arrogant look, oh, who is this? Does he even need to take the exam? Let his sister arrange it as she wishes. His companion smirked and said, the eldest daughter of the Li family won't take care of her useless brother. And the third one, folding his arms, added, yes, this is truly a disgrace to the entire family. They should have cut off all ties with this trash right away. Keita looked down and said, Ouyang Wei, he should stop. In response, the hunter grabbed his shirt and exclaimed indignantly, did he say something? He should speak louder, he can't hear him. Keita awkwardly put his hand out in front of him and asked him to let go. At this moment, Ying pushed Wei away and shouted, hey, he said to let go. His comrade jumped to catch him and exclaimed, be careful, brother Wei. The bully leaned on his friend's shoulder and pointed his finger forward, shouting, damn girl, does she even know who he is? He can only say one thing, the path to the Hunter Academy is now closed to her. She indignantly said, who does he think he is? The protagonist asked, who is he himself? From what family? Ouyang, he seems to remember. Ying looked at him in surprise and thought, how does he know them? Wei pointed at the protagonist and indignantly exclaimed, puppy, who is he anyway? Do you want to play the hero? He should disappear from sight and not show himself. The main character put his hands in his pockets with a slight smile and asked if he was telling him this. He is just one of the students taking the exam. Wei smirked and said, is that so? Since they are all gathered here, they should get to know each other better. He walked up close and said that they would meet at the exam, and then turned around to face the opposite direction. Keita walked up to Haoyan and put his hand on his chest, saying that he would definitely take revenge. He shouldn't have interfered, after all, he would only be picking on him like that. Ying shouted, of course they would meet. Does he think he scared them? She then walked up to Keita and asked why he was picking on him in the first place. Besides, there are such jerks everywhere, he needs to learn to stop being afraid of them. In response, he apologized for dragging them into all this. He awkwardly lowered his gaze and said, Ouyang Wei is the young master of the Ouyang family. And she has a lot of power and connections, and is also a permanent member of the academy's board. Even if they pass the exam, he still won't leave them alone. Then she put her hand on his shoulder and told him not to worry, everything will be fine. The protagonist looked at him and said that they needed to go to prepare for the next test. After that, he looked to the side and thought, the Ouyang family. Some time after entering the labyrinth, an academy employee said that this test lasts for half an hour. If you do not get out of the labyrinth during this time, the exam is considered failed. He raised his hand up and shouted that there are various traps in the labyrinth that students must deal with on their own. It starts in 15 seconds, good luck to everyone. Then the heroes approached the entrance to the labyrinth. Ying put her hands to her chest and, looking at Haoyan, shouted that he must pass. At this time, Wei passed by them and noticed how Ying wished good luck to Cade, who awkwardly said that he would try his best. The host announced the start of the countdown, and the main characters entered the labyrinth. He walked around it, wondering if he should sit down and rest. If he took the shortcut, he would get out of the labyrinth in just 5 minutes. After all, this was his creation. He looked to the side and thought about how Ying would overcome all the traps. Then he smiled and told himself that there was no need to rush. If he got out too quickly, it would not match his current level. He ran forward and exclaimed, well, let's go. He hid behind the wall, watching Ying confidently walk through the labyrinth. Peeking out from around the corner, he thought that she could show at least a little excitement. The exam was difficult after all. Suddenly, a 2-star mimic demon jumped towards her, blocking her path and using a trap skill. Ying looked at it with confidence and stretched out her hand forward, shouting, hey, idiot, why is he frozen? Are you scared or something? The demon got angry and stretched out his hand with long claws towards her. She jumped aside and exclaimed, here he is. The demon stepped on the magic symbol on the floor, and she, coming closer to him, pointed her finger at him and said, one of the main features of demons is low intelligence. They are very easy to anger. And direct confrontation is not her strong point. Watching what was happening from above the wall, the protagonist thought, well, an excellent student is an excellent student. It seems that she has already learned everything he wrote in the basic textbook. She is doing great, and she has no shortage of talent. Suddenly, a bright flash came from the next part of the labyrinth. Ying noticed this and ran in that direction, shouting that Keita was there right now. Haoyan looked at her with a smile and said, oh, this girl, always meddling in other people's business. At this moment, Wei attacked Keita, and he flew into the wall. He exclaimed arrogantly, well, Keita, is he giving up? Wei pointed his finger at him, smirked and asked, where are his protectors now? Why is no one rushing to help? But they should have come running by now, considering how noisy they are here. Keita gritted his teeth and, covering his face with his hands, said that he does not know them, they have nothing to do with him. There is no need to touch them. Wei, furious, exclaimed, what is he saying? Would strangers help him for no reason? Does he think he is that stupid? Keita, leaning on the wall, rose to his feet and said, Wei, he himself made a mistake, for which his sister punished him. She was just doing her job. Wei smirked and said, so what now? His family is one of the shareholders of the guild, so her salary is paid from their pocket. Although he thinks that his sister despises him more than he does, he is the shame of the entire family. He gave him a thumbs-down gesture and shouted, worthless. His sister awakened a powerful ability, and his younger brother is nothing. All expectations were shattered into dust. Even though they share the same blood, there is a huge gap between them. Trash. He only exists to remind everyone that even in a family of geniuses, losers are born. At these words, Kata knelt down and grabbed his head. Wei stood in front of him and concentrated energy in his hand and said, so Kata, will he give up on his own or will he have to help him a little? He does not want to study with such trash. At this moment, Ying appeared from behind the wall and said, the one who constantly calls others trash is not worthy of being her classmate. He was just lucky that his ability was stronger. Is he proud of it? Wei looked at her and said, this impudent girl again. Then he smiled and said, a strong ability only proves that he has good genes. And those who have the opposite should be crossed out. Ying, walking up to Keita, extended her hand to him and said, and it turns out that he is a social Darwinist. Then she looked at Kita with sympathy and asked, "How is he? Can he stand up?" He, embarrassed, confirmed her words and then said that it was not at all necessary to help him, and it was better to focus on the exam. Ying retorted with a smile that she would pass it anyway. Then, pointing her finger at Wei, she resolutely said that she did not want to study with such a person. She thinks that a personality test should be added to the Academy's entrance exam to prevent those who do not meet high standards from being admitted. The protagonist, who was watching from behind the wall, picked up a piece of paper and thought, "Let's write it down while taking notes." He glanced at Ying and admired her straightforwardness. The next moment, a monster appeared next to him, stretching out its arms towards the protagonist and growling loudly. Hao Yan pulled himself together and thought, okay, maybe he should test his strength too. He punched the monster in the stomach, and it crumbled into many small cubes. The protagonist closed his eyes and noted, too slow, he would need to reconfigure the labyrinth after the exam. Then he came out from behind the wall and shouted, "Hey, sicko, what did he say about Xiaoying?" Wei turned around with a grin and exclaimed, "Wow, another one came. Is this 2-on-1? He was already starting to feel scared, but his eyes widened in surprise when the protagonist appeared in the air in front of him. He thought that he was incredibly fast. Feigning, who was watching this from the big screen, asked the employee to enlarge the image from camera 004. The employee, looking at the screen of his tablet, said that he was following her instructions. On the screen, the protagonist was seen swinging his arm to strike. Wei, seeing the hand approaching him, exclaimed, "Him." Hao Yan slapped him in the face and shouted, "It seems like someone lacks manners." "Well, he will fix it now." Watching this, Keita asked in surprise, "A slap?" Ying, covering her face with her hand, sighed heavily and thought he started scolding everyone around again like an old man. Feigning, looking at the camera feed, adjusted her glasses and said with a smile, "This young man reminds her of someone." Wei, wiping his face with his hand, exclaimed, "How dare he hit him?" He then concentrated energy in his hands and, directing it forward, shouted, "Die, freak!" Hao Yan appeared in front of him in the next moment and said, "If you don't teach him a lesson now, then it will be too late." He hit him and remarked that it's time for him to learn to talk normally, because in the real world, no one will tolerate his antics. Wei landed on one knee nearby and, concentrating energy in his hand, shouted that he won't let this go. Leaning on the ground with his hand, he activated the Hydro Dash ability and appeared behind the protagonist. Gritting his teeth in anger, he swung his fist and exclaimed that he was finished. Hao Yan appeared at his side at this moment and said, "Young man, there is no need to be so hot-tempered. The most important thing is politeness." He swung his foot and hit Wei on the head, causing several of his teeth to fly out. The bully then turned around and pointed his finger at him, shouting, "Who the hell is he to lecture him?" The protagonist then easily knocked Wei out, and Keita, amazed, exclaimed, "Does he really have the same ability?" He was amazed at how the protagonist knocked out Wei with one kick, even though he was only at level 0 awakening. It was unbelievable. At this moment, Ying walked up to the protagonist with her hands on her hips and said indignantly, "Hey, he's taking all the attention again." He looked at her and said that he just wanted to teach that impudent boy a lesson, and he also couldn't stand to see her fidgeting. Then he walked forward and announced with a smile, "That's it, enough chatter. The exam will be over soon, it's time to go." Ying folded her arms and said she was really curious about why the machine couldn't detect his ability. Maybe she should suggest that the academy improve its equipment. She then turned her attention to Keita, who was standing next to Wei, pointing a finger at him and waving his hand. He asked, "What about him? Are they really going to leave him like this?" Ying winked at him and said that he was just taking a rest, so there was no need to disturb him, and they left. Hao Yan explained that the time limit was to test one's observation skills, reaction, and ability to make decisions in a critical situation. But the most important thing was combat ability. Wei failed precisely because of their lack. Even if he had passed the exam, he would still have lost to any demon in the future. Keita, looking at his comrades leaving, awkwardly asked, "Are they really going to leave him?" Hao Yan waved his hand and replied, "Well, they weren't his nannies. If he fails the exam, it will be better for him." Then, Keita ran after them and shouted for them to wait for him. After some time in the academy dormitory, Keita walked up to the door of the room and looked at the piece of paper in his hands and thought, did he really pass the entrance exam? He rubbed his face with his fist and thought that he managed to get into the academy. Hao Yan, sitting on the edge of the bed, shouted, "Keita, what is he standing at the door for? He can come in now." Keita smiled and agreed with him, and went inside. The protagonist leaned on the bed and said that the opening ceremony would be held next Monday. They said that his sister would be giving a speech. Keita sat opposite him and, confirming his words, said that she was one of the first graduates of the academy, and one of the most outstanding ones. Haoyan thought, Li Kursin, her name is still etched in his memory. Keita smiled and said that he was far from her, he was useless. The protagonist glanced at him briefly, then raised his hand and said that everyone born in this world has their own talent. So he should stop thinking that he is worse than others. Natural ability certainly gives a certain advantage, but perseverance and hard work are much more important. He knows one person who at first couldn't even hold a knife properly. And then he single-handedly destroyed entire flocks of monsters in the void. Keita asked in surprise, the void? What is this? The protagonist smiled awkwardly and said, He thought, damn. A dungeon of this level hasn't appeared yet. He let it slip. Then he awkwardly scratched the back of his head and, smiling, showed the screen of his phone and said that it was about a mobile game. This is a high-level villain. Keita smiled and thanked him. He said that he helped him during the exam and is now comforting him. The protagonist smiled awkwardly and, scratching his cheek, said, well, they are now in the same group, and they are also roommates. So helping each other is completely normal. Then he sighed and thought, it's good that he didn't think it through. Then he got out of bed and said, oh yeah. He has to go to the airport tonight, so he probably won't be back until Monday. His parents are currently on vacation abroad, and he wanted to visit them. Keita said, sure, no problem. A few hours later, on the helipad, the exterminator and Feinin were watching the helicopter approaching them. He looked at the secretary and said, the evaluation results, he still has to do it himself. She adjusted her glasses and looked at him and said, come on. She then climbed inside the helicopter while he held her buttocks and said, this is an A+ dungeon. She then turned around and said, the 5-star specialists and executors from the guild are busy with their own things. But he has quite a lot of free time these days. The protagonist desperately said that she just wants to save money. She smiled and said, got you. He sees right through her. The exterminator then walked inside and said that they are leaving. When they took their seats, the secretary looked at him and asked him to let her enter the dungeon with him this time. He looked at her thoughtfully. And she was surprised by his look and, putting her hand to her chest, asked, did he see something interesting? He looked away and said how depraved the youth of today are, he is just assessing how long they will last there. She indignantly shouted, what did he say? In the sunny city, after some time, the fighter sat down behind the wall and, putting the phone to his ear, said, what? Where is he? Well, he went out to get some fresh air. Ying indignantly exclaimed, where did he go? He told Kata that he went on a trip with his uncle and aunt. She just called them, and they are hearing about it for the first time. Where is he really? The protagonist, moving the phone away from his ear, said that he had urgent business and would be back in a couple of days. At that moment, Feinin approached him and, putting her hand to her chest, asked, sir? The protagonist, opening his eyes in surprise, hung up. Ying, in turn, looked at her phone screen in surprise and asked, did he hang up? Then, clenching her fist, she thought, what kind of female voice was that? After that, she tore her pillow apart with one blow and exclaimed, what a scoundrel! He's finished. At that moment, the exterminator looked at the secretary and asked why she was looking for him. He hoped that Feinin hadn't heard anything. She asked, had he forgotten already? It was time to go to the dungeon. She was distracted by just one call, and he had already disappeared. She couldn't leave him alone for a second. Then she leaned over to him and, putting her index finger to his forehead, said that she was starting to think he had Alzheimer's. He looked away and assured her that it couldn't be. Then she patted him on the cheek and said that he shouldn't be afraid of that, but of being accidentally noticed. His nose was bleeding. Then she folded her arms over her chest and said, pervert. After that, she turned around and said that they should go. The fighter wiped the blood under his nose and said, damn, his own nose let him down again. After a while, they approached the building and then went inside. The armed man saluted the protagonist. The fighter lit a cigar and said that there was no need for formalities. They should just wait outside. The soldier replied that they served the people. Feinin looked at the protagonist, who approached the gate, and asked if she should go with him. He looked at her and said, no need to worry. And then he went inside. He was used to doing everything alone, it would be better for everyone. Dungeons gates began to appear all over the world sometime after he sealed the Demon King. The nature of their appearance is unknown. A portal is a border between two worlds. Inside the dungeons live demons and mythical beasts who want to destroy the earth. The higher the level of the dungeon, the better the reward. After some time, the fighter walked into the main hall and, lighting a cigar, shouted, "Hey, come out, let's fight!" The monster's eyes fixed on him, and then a strong attack flew towards him. And then the monster itself appeared. Haoyan thought, so this is the Weaver of Misfortune. He even fought with it several times in his past life. Then he noticed his burnt cloak and exclaimed, "It was a gift, damn mongrel!" He thought that the monster just took and tore his cloak. Then he began to attack the monster and shouted, "Well, that's it, now he will definitely die. He can't even hope to escape." To deal with a mythical beast of this level, you need an awakening of at least 4 stars. But he had long since surpassed this level, so it wouldn't be difficult to defeat. And then the monster made a loud noise, and the slayer gritted his teeth, grabbed his ears and said, "How noisy." After that, he sighed and thought, but he can't just go and kill it. He needs to write everything down for the guild's training manual. How difficult it is. At this moment, the monster's hand was approaching him, and after dodging, he thought, "Hey, why did he speed up so much?" Then he took out a notebook and pen and began to take notes, dictating to himself, "The main attack method is sweeping strikes. You need to watch your hands and dodge." At this moment, he jumped into the air, dodging a powerful paw strike. He then repeated this maneuver several times and, stopping nearby, continued, "After 3 unsuccessful attacks, the monster will get angry and go berserk. So you need to be more vigilant." At this moment, the monster began to concentrate fire energy in its mouth, and the fighter said, "When this happens then." He dodged the fire attack and continued, "There will be a perfect opportunity to kill it." The Weaver is not very intelligent, so when using his skills, he does not care about protecting from behind. At this moment, he was behind the monster, and, concentrating energy, he resolutely ran forward, exclaiming, "This is the end." He used a powerful attack, from which the monster split into several parts. The protagonist grabbed its head, which was already disintegrating into many small cubes, and received the core. After a while, he found himself in an open space and thought that this dungeon has quite a lot of resources. It remains only to find out how often it is updated. If this one has a short cycle, then it is a real treasure for their country. Then he clapped his hands with a smile and thought, he intends to get 50% of all the income. Lucky, lucky! Suddenly, an axe flew to him and pierced the rock behind him. A horde of orcs was approaching Haoyan. He lowered his head and said, "Now this looks like an A+ dungeon." Several ogres with glowing eyes were heading towards him. And he took out his notebook with a smile and said, "Judging by their number, it is designed for teamwork." However, ogres are not that scary. The entrance exam used simulations of various creatures, such as orcs. The peculiarity of these demons is that they are extremely stupid and easily provoked, and it is not recommended to fight them in close combat. After that, he rose into the air and, directing his attack forward, exclaimed that he hoped that the students carefully studied the manual he wrote. But there is no need to tell you what will happen next. He struck the monsters again and said, moreover, he will deliberately go against what he himself wrote in the manual. He found himself surrounded by orcs, and then confidently looked up. Then he spread his arms out to the sides and shouted loudly, reproducing a powerful attack, causing the monsters above him to explode. After that, the protagonist put a cigarette in his mouth and used his finger to light it. The fight was over, and he sat down on a stone, resting his foot on the head of one of the monsters. He put his finger on the stone and said, 15 seconds, reboot every 15 days. A short cycle is great. Then one of the monsters, leaning on his hand, raised his head and said, the demon king will definitely return. And then he disintegrated into several cubes.